Alright, let's do this. This time I have another check on my checklist that says confirm that microphone is on. I think the microphone's on this time. Because because I forgot to plan something really today. I had a busy day. We had to go see a specialist to get something checked out with our daughter. Everything's fine. Thanks for asking. I didn't have time to prepare anything for the stream today. And I found something that I have always meant to do, but never did, because I feel relatively comfortable using Flexbox. But for those wanting to get into Flexbox, Flexbox Froggy is always a very good recommendation. I hear it's supposed to be a game that teaches us how to use Flexbox by writing some CSS to move the frog to this little lily pad over here. And I assume it's going to be more frogs, and it's going to be a few different lessons over time. And I'm going to walk through a few of those lessons here. I see it seems to have 24. And if those are relatively easy, then we are going to go over to Grid Garden, which is the same concept, but for grid, CSS grid. I'm gonna jump straight in. This is the frog, this is the lily pad. Welcome to Flexbox Froggy, a game where you help Froggy and friends, so there's gonna be more frogs, by writing CSS code. Guide this frog to the lily pad on the right by using the justify content property. So already they're teaching us about justify content, which tells us, so we have a flex container. Flexbox is a one-dimensional layout, and elements in it are either oriented horizontally or vertically. There's no both. It's one direction across one single, what's the word? One single axis. And by default, a flex container has a horizontal layout, and we can orient these elements in there. The pond seems to be the entire Flexbox container to different positions. So if we go justify content, okay, move it to the right, and this is the line that we need to write. But if we did flex start, nothing would change because flex start is the default value. If we went center, then the frog would move to the center. It updates automatically. Nice. And let's do flex end to move all children towards the end of this next lesson, please. He did bounce. So we have two frogs now. Use justify content again to help these frogs get to their lily pads. They still want us to use justify content, and we see these are next to each other, and we want to, in this, center them in the container. So justify content center. Is that it? That is it, and it lets me go to the next session. Next lesson. Nice. They jumped off. Oh, now we have 3 frogs. Now we can see what... Oh, nice. Okay, I thought they were going to make this a bit more difficult by not telling us what the options are, but if I hover over justify content, I see that it has flex start, flex end, center, space between, space around, and space evenly. And I don't think the first choice would be it. So if we go space between, then it takes the first one, puts it at the front, takes the last one, puts it at the back, and everything else is spaced between. No, wait. Yeah, no, that would be space between. So justify content space between, and that wouldn't be it. Because while this yellow one is centered now, these two aren't. Space between puts the first one right at the edge and puts the last one right at the edge. Not exactly what we want. We want to space them evenly. We want this one to move a little to the right, and this one to move a little to the left. So space between. Isn't it? Space around. I just replaced space between with space between. Space around. As I said, long day, long day. Space around was it. I like this animation where they fly off. Now this is the one that we had before, where we want the first one to be at the very front and the last one to be at the end, and that was space between. Justify content, space between. I think you hear music. I don't hear music. I think you hear me. I hear myself also. What's next? Oh, now we want the frogs to move to the bottom. Now it will appear to like a two-dimensional layer, but it's still across one axis. If we imagine there is a single line going through the middle here, and we can, across this line, space them. So we can say green, stay where you are, yellow, move to the center, and red, move to the end. We could do that with justify content. Now we want to align items, and align items is the other direction, like mirrored across this axis in the center almost. And we now don't, I took a screenshot, nope, thank you. And we do that with align items. We can put them at the flex start, which is where they start by default. And we also have, let's do align items center. Those will be centered in the container. We don't want them there. I wonder if they have stretch with the frogs. No, stretch does something to the container where it takes up the entire height. Is stretch the default? Stretch is the default. We can't see the default here. If they could grow taller, the frog would be very, very tall now. Flex start would be only have as much height as you need. But we want them at the flex end on this axis. And continue to the next. Okay, if this is how fast all of these lessons go, then we'll get to Grid Garden easy. Now they want us to center the frog across both axes. So we need to justify content and align items both on center, because that lily pad is smack in the center of this pond. Justify content center and align items center. Now if something doesn't appear where you want it to, but you think you have the right values, it's 99% of the time we mixed up justify content and align items, because the way that they go across the axes isn't always as intuitive as it could be. So if it doesn't work and you're using align items, try replacing it with justify content. Why do I sound drunk? What else? What else? Okay, more combination. They want us to distribute them. We had that before. It wasn't the space between, it was the space around. So justify content space around, and just to show you what I mean, if we did align items space around, nothing would happen, because align items doesn't have a space around. But both of them have flex start and flex end. So if we did align items flex end, this is a good step. But if we did justify content flex end instead, we would have moved them over there. So because the value is the same, we know we want something to be flex end. It's not justify content. All right, it's got to be align items instead. Align items, and then we want to space them out again. Justify content space around. Look at that, they're on their lily pads. The order in CSS doesn't matter as long as we don't have anything that overrides this, whether we say align items or justify content first, whatever floats your boat. Or floats your lily pad. Oh, nice. Now we want them to be right next to each other. But wait, if we move them with justify content, flex end, they are each on their own individual lily pad, but that is the wrong order. Yellow is on the right lily pad, but blue and red are switched, are flipped, so we now need to reverse the order of this entire thing. And let's do that with just flex direction. Row is the default. We could also say go column, and then we'd have them all in a column. If we did column reverse, they would all, first of all, be at the bottom of this pond, and then be the other way around. So instead of going green, yellow, red, it now goes red, yellow, green. We can do the same with row. So if row goes green, yellow, red, but we wanted to go red, yellow, green, we go flex direction, row, reverse. Sweet. That was it. level 9. Okay, we just had that flex direction. Put them all in a column. Now the axis has moved, whereas before, is that fair to say? I think that is the axis that it goes by default. Or is it the other way around? See, another one of those that confuses me. But we just switched the axis from being horizontal to vertical at least. Now we want to flip them around. So first we are going to go flex direction. They're still in a row, but we want them to be reversed, row reverse. And now we want to move them to the left. Now if we go justify content, flex start. Before, that put everything on the left, but because now everything is reversed, we need to put them at the flex end. Isn't that tricky? So flex start does not mean put them on the left side of this container, but put them at the start of whatever this flex container is. And if it is a reverse row, then it starts on the other side. It starts on the reverse side. So we need to go flex end here. Next level, please. Now we want to have them in a column, so we need to go flex direction, column, and we want to move them down. Align items. Now, let's see. Before it was flex end. What is this now? Because now we are in a column. In a row, flex end was the bottom, but in a column, flex end is the right side. That's a bit tricky with how it moved them around. We now want to have them. What did I have? Flex end. Flex end, isn't it? Let's see what else our options are. Flex start, flex end, baseline, and stretch. And flex end isn't it. What is baseline? That isn't it either. If the flex direction is column, and I want you to be down there, and flex start isn't it? Wait, now I'm confused. Now they stumped me. If the flex direction is column, because we want them to be in a column, because the column puts them in this order. Align items, flex end, puts them on this side though. What other options are there? Justify I'm looking at the wrong settings. I was looking at see, again, I was doing align items. I was trying to do align items when I needed to do justify content. Justify content, that's usually it with Flexbox. If something doesn't work, you're mixing up align items and justify content. And it says here, if you read the instructions, it's a bit easier. Use flex direction and justify content. If you try align items, it just doesn't work. It just does not work. Help the frogs find the lily pads using flex direction and justify content. So we want the red to come first, so we need to go flex direction, column reverse, and justify content space between. Put the first one right at the edge, put the last one right at the edge, and everything else in the middle is spread out evenly with the spacing between those evened out. Okay, we have, so here it says use flex direction, justify content, and align items. Alright, so we know we want them in a row. So we are going to keep flex direction on row, but we need to reverse it. So we're gonna go flex direction, row reverse. Now we want to justify content, and I know I'm gonna use the wrong one, so I'm gonna go center here. Center is right, and align items, flex end. That one was a guess between justify content and align items, because it might as well have been the other way around. What's this? Okay. So we have them all on lily pads already. We can't change anything about the pond. Before we changed the settings on the ID of pond, which is the entire blue thing here. Now we have a class just for the yellow frog. And we can put the yellow frog is not a flex container, the yellow frog is a flex item. And a flex item can receive an order property. And let's give it -1. And that moves it to the beginning. Let's give it order of 0. That leaves it where it is. So everything, assume that everything in here, every frog has by default an order of 0. Is that right? Yeah. It says here it's an integer value that goes, well, through all the negative to positive integer values, with 0 being the default. If I put it to 0, nothing changes. And because they all have the same order, they are placed in whatever order they appear in the source as. Yeah. And because I assume that in the HTML they have the green frog, then the yellow frog, then the red frog, and they all have order of 0. That's the order they appear here. Now if what I did before, if I put an order of -1 on the yellow one, only the yellow one changes. It moves to the beginning. It moves to before all the ones that have a 0, a default 0 set on them. And if I moved it to 1, it would appear after all the other ones that have a 0. So this one, the green frog, has order of 0, red has an order of 0, and because this one is an integer value of greater than 0, we move it to the end. We might as well have moved, no, I don't think we could have done the same if we'd moved the red one. So if we only want to set a single setting, we had to go with yellow here, I think. Many frogs. Okay, there's 4 green frogs and a red frog and only 1 red lily pad. Again, if we don't have anything else set on them, every flex item has an order of 0. And we can change one line on the red frog. And if we want that to appear before all the 0s, we can give it any negative value. So your order is -999. That works. -700 would also have worked. -1 would also have worked. 0 wouldn't have worked because 0 would leave it where it is. Any negative value puts it before all the other ones that have their default value set to 0. Another property you can apply to individual items is align self. So before, when we did align items and justify content, we did that all on the pond, on the big parent container. And that moved everything down. So if we said align items flex end, everything would move down. But we only want to move the yellow one down now, whereas we want the green ones to stay where they are. When we have align items on the parent container, we have align self on the individual flex items. So we can go, and they have the same settings. If we hover over here, we see flex start, flex end, center, baseline, stretch. Flex start, flex end, center, baseline, stretch for the align items value. Align self. Align self is flex end, only that one moves down, everything else stays where it is. Sweet. Now we can move everything that has a class of yellow. So this one selector will apply to both this yellow frog and this yellow frog. And we have to use order now. We have to combine order and align self. So first we want the green frogs to all appear on the left here. And we said if we can only change the yellow, they need to have an order greater than 0, greater than the default, to appear at the end. So order of 1 would work, order of 10 would work, order of 999 would work, any value that's greater than 0. So that for one, and align self, align senf, align mustard, align self to flex end, move down here That's actually neat. I haven't used order in that way before. That's cool. Oh, look at that. Those are some squishy frogs. Oh no, the frogs are all squeezed into a single row of lily pads. Spread them out using the flex wrap property. Okay. So by default, children in a flex container will take up more or less space if there is more or less space available. Here we see that the frogs, we have 2, 4, 6, 7 frogs in a row, but only 5 lily pads. And because nothing wraps, they get squeezed. So all of them fit into this single row. We can change that by, on the parent, saying, you know, if they need more space, rather than squishing them, just move some down, move some to the next line. We don't really have a lot of control over that, so it doesn't give us full control in a two-dimensional layout. But we can say, you know, just leave them their space. It's cool. And we don't have to change anything about the order because we see yellow, green, 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 green ends with red. And that's the amount of lily pads and the style of lily pads that we have also. So we can go flex wrap. No wrap is the default. Every item is fit to a single line. That is silly. We can also go and let's say wrap reverse. So everything wraps, but starting from the bottom here and everything is reversed, kind of wrong. What we want is flex wrap. Just if it needs more space, and now look, they are all of a reasonable frog size, and we don't have full control over this spacing here as of yet. Level 19, those are faster than I thought. Oh, look at that. Help this army of frogs, okay? That's a bit aggressive. Help this army of, or is that the plural? Is that the collective term for frogs? Is it one frog and an army of frogs? Help this army of frogs form 3 orderly columns using a combination of flex direction and flex wrap. So they need to be in columns first. Let's go with flex direction column. That one seems pretty obvious. But now they're squished in the vertical. Again, if there isn't enough space, it doesn't wrap by default. Before, it sounded, we could say wrap it into a new line. And wrapping to a new line kind of makes sense because we have that in other software. Here we want to wrap them to new columns. So after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frogs, which is as much, they need exactly this much space. We want to wrap to a new column. All we need to say is flex wrap, wrap. And they are spaced by this, like this by default. And there's only 4 more lessons. Okay. The two properties flex direction and flex wrap are used so often together that the shorthand property flex flow was created. I don't think I've used flex flow. Was created to combine them. This shorthand property accepts the value of the two properties separated by a space. For example, you can use flex flow row wrap, say that 3 times fast, to set rows and wrap them. Try using flex flow to repeat the previous level. So we want to have them in a column and we want the row to wrap. So flex flow, column and wrap. Well, you look at that. It's convenient, it's nice, sure. If you use Tailwind, I'm not sure if they have a combined class for that, and honestly they wouldn't. We could have done the same in 2 lines of CSS and nothing would have been different. It would have been the same. It's good to know that FlexFlow exists. What's this now? Okay, so everything wraps. We have a pond, which is a display flex, is a flex container, and the lines are told to flex wrap. And here we see the spacing between the frogs is kind of even. We know that because of the previous lesson, this pond can fit 5 lily pads in the horizontal and the vertical. But that doesn't line up quite evenly here, because this height over here is the same as this height, is the same as this height. So really we're taking what can fit 5 lily pads, and we're using it like it has 6 units because of the wrapping. The frogs are spread all over the pond, but the lily pads are bunched at the top. Now we can use align content, or justify, no, don't mix it up with the justify content, align content here. Flex start. Lines are packed at the top of the container. That sounds exactly like what we want. Just move them all up. But let's do flex end. What does that do? You see these ones, we didn't have that before. We didn't have frogs that fit neatly on this middle row here. What did I set it to? Flex end. Now these fit here nicely and they seem to be spread out evenly. That seems good. We could also have gone with space between, which is one at the very beginning, one at the very end, and the others centered around the remaining space, centered in the remaining space. Or space around, which is not put this at the very beginning, but it is take the space that isn't occupied by frogs. Okay, that's important. Let's go flex end. Take the space that is not occupied by a frog right now, which is 2 lily pads worth of space. And if we go space between, so we have 2 lily pads worth of space in the vertical. And by space between, we say you have rows here, and there is 2 lily pads worth of space remaining. That's empty. Put that space between the rows, between the full rows. So we're not really saying put that at the beginning, put that at the end, but we're saying any space that's not occupied by frogs, space that out evenly. If we did space around, you see the center row doesn't change, but the others move in. Because we're now saying we have 2 lily pads worth of space. Put those evenly around the frogs. So what we have is 1 unit here and 1 unit here for this row. This row has 1 equal unit on top and at the bottom. And same for this one. 1 unit here and 1 unit here. And another for this one, 1 unit here and 1 unit here. So what we're really doing is, let's count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Take the 2 lily pads worth of space, divide them into 6 equal units, and put them around the frogs. So that would be 2/3 of a lily pad. Right? We have 2, divide them by 6, 2/6 is 1/3 of a lily pad. Anyway, divided evenly. And here, I mean, stretch we wouldn't see because the frogs, I don't think the frogs would stretch. That is the default. Now these are just the 2 lily pads worth of space are divided into 1, 2, 3 here and added to each of them. We want instead to put them all at the flex start. By default, if we want stuff to stick to the top, do flex start. 3 more levels, including this one. Now the current has bunched the lily pads at the bottom. Use align content to guide the frogs there. Okay, we just had that. Align content. Flex end. Did I do align content in the last one? I don't remember. Ooh, okay. Okay, so combine a few of the things that we learned so far. The frogs have had a party, but it's time to go home. Oh, they're all drunk and they don't know where they live. So we need to change the flex direction and the align content. So first we can tell that they need to be in a, let's put them in a column first. Flex direction, column. But that, if we undo that, we have red here and yellow here. If we put them in a column, rotate that 90 degrees. But that's not the direction that we want, because now red is at the top, yellow is at the bottom, whereas we want that to be reversed. So we do column reverse. And it looks like nothing changes with the green ones. We can see the red and yellow change place. And it looks like the green just don't do anything. But they, of course, are reversed as well. If we have this frog here and this frog here, and we go column reverse, they just switch place. So the one that was at the top is now at the bottom, and the other way around. We just don't see it because they look exactly the same. But of course everything is reversed and not just the things that are different. That wouldn't be possible. And we want align content. Let's do center. How's center look? Okay, so there is more space here. They don't need all the empty space here. Let's center them, and any space that is remaining, put as much on the left as you do on the right side. Next. That's the last level. We are going to combine everything now. Bring the frogs home one last time by using the CSS properties you've learned. So we can combine, and it seems like they want us to use 3 to 4 different settings. Let's do this. Let's do flex direction column first, because we know that we need to have them all in a column here. Then let's do flex wrap. We might need to use flow to do that evenly. Now it looks kind of okay, but it's reversed, right? And we want the red one to be down here also. So let's say the flex direction is column reverse. And that wasn't it. Ah, that was it. That was it. Now, that was not it. Shouldn't speak too soon. What do we have? Justify content will have to be part of this. Justify content, space between, align items, space between. Nope. I'm being reckless. I'm just throwing CSS at it now. That's never a good sign. We do something without thinking, and we just add more lines and hope something works eventually. That doesn't make for very maintainable, very good code. So I'm gonna undo all of this. What do I want? I want the yellow and red frog to switch places at least. So let's do flex direction. Let's start with row reverse. Now I'd have them all here. I have these on that position. Then we have the green ones and the red one down here. So I'm pretty sure it needs to be column reverse. And then I also want you to flex wrap. Something needs to wrap because they didn't have the right size. If we use justify content, if we do justify content, it does it across the one of the axes. I'm not gonna say the wrong one because I know I'm gonna mess it up. Content center. That seems better. The yellow ones are now in the right position. What else does flex wrap? There, we didn't look closely before. Flex wrap has a wrap and a wrap reverse. What does that do? So now I like where the green and red ones are at, but yellow isn't where we need it to be yet. So we reversed the wrapping. Whereas they wrapped this way around first, and we first had the green ones and then the yellow ones. The distribution is the same. We still wrap in these groups, and the yellow ones are separated here, but they are the other way around. if you need to do that, I'd say change the order in your markup. It doesn't need to. It's sweet that it can be controlled with CSS, but that doesn't seem like something I would want to have in my code. Oh, well, we could add more. No, it doesn't let me add. Nope, it just wants me to write this many lines of code. How do we get the frogs over here now? We have align content. Let's do between, space between. And there we go. So we have justify content. On this axis you are centered, and on the other axis there is space between you. So these are more lessons. And that was fun. That was a nice little teaser, nice little brain teaser. And I am afraid, no, Flexbox Froggy, cool, you did it. What does that mean? What's this? What's 1:12:24? I assume I did a good job. I feel good about this. Again, it's unlikely that you're gonna have to write CSS like that to put elements there. This last one was a bit out there, but it's pretty nice that this is possible. Oh, I don't know if I don't think I'm streaming computer audio, so I think Flexbox Froggy would make noise also. But let's move on. We still this didn't take too long. It took like half an hour. Let's look at Grid Garden as well. And Grid I haven't used as much, because we can nest Flexbox containers well enough that if we want to have something spread out across multiple axes, we can usually wrap it in another container and give that container, make the parent and child container different Flex containers. It works, but if we want to have something placed on a two-dimensional grid now, and we see this has grid lines also, this looks like a grid now, and isn't just lily pads. If we want to place something based on columns and rows, we are working on 2 dimensions, and 2-dimensional layouts we can do much more easily with grid. What's the point of Grid Garden? I don't know. Welcome to Grid Garden, where you write CSS code to grow your carrot garden. Oh, nice. Okay. Water only the areas that have carrots by using the grid column start property. Okay, so this is the water, and we want the water to be where the carrots are. Let's look at that. First, we have the full garden, which is this grid here. It has display grid set on it, and template columns and template rows, each of 20%. So both in both directions. So I assume this means this column, and this column, and this column, and this column, and this column all take up 20%, so they're evenly divided into fifths, and same in the rows. So if they want me to do grid column start, and I'm not changing anything about the grid, I'm changing something about the water. So I'm moving the water now, and I'm telling it you're not starting in whatever column this is. I want you to start on the grid column 3. So that will mean the numbering system here is this is column 1, column 2, column 3, 4, and 5, being 1 indexed and not 0 indexed. That's good to know. See, they taught us something sneakily here. Uh-oh, looks like weeds are growing in the corner of the garden. Use grid column start to poison them. Note that the weeds start at the 5th vertical grid line. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So they're going lines. So what we did before wasn't we put it here, but we put it after the grid line, and this would be grid line 1, grid line 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I assume that would then mean this isn't 6, but it ends at 5. So we want the poison to start at the grid column, and I want you to move from your position of 1. Let's move it at 2, at 3, at 4, at 5. When grid column start is used alone, the grid item by default will span exactly one column. Okay, so we can now give it a grid end also to say you start here and you end here, because if we don't, as they say here, if we don't, we move it in its current size, in its current dimensions across the grid. We have grid column start set already on the water. Now we want the grid column end. What grid line do we want to end this at? And we counted before, this would be line 1, 2, 3. So if we did 3, we'd only cover these first 2. If we wanted to cover 3 elements, we would go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. Grid column end 4. And we now span, so it stops right at 4. It doesn't go to 4, but that gives us enough water for the 3 carrots there. And we don't. Okay, so the order of grid column start and grid column end doesn't matter. Right now, this water is set to start at the grid column 5. Counting again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It starts down here. And it ends, I assume, at 6. I assume maybe that is possible to have values larger than we have columns set already. So if I give it a grid column end, and I say I want you to end at 1, 2, 3, 4. Now the water seems like it moved, but we didn't really move it. It still starts at this grid column 5, but it ends at 1 before it. So the order doesn't matter. We don't have to go from left to right. We can go from right to left also. That is neat. So if we go 2, then we still span it across all the carrots. If you want to count grid lines from the right instead of the left, you can give grid column start and grid column end negative values. That doesn't sound like it's complicated at all. For example, you can set it to -1 to specify the first grid line from the right. Try setting grid column end to a negative value. Grid column end, let's do -2. Oh, okay, I accidentally solved it. How? What? So counting from, what? So we start at line 1. We start here. And we end, what? If we end at -4, which one's 4? If this is -1, oh, okay. So this would be 6 usually, but if we give it a negative value and we said it was 1 indexed, it wasn't 0 indexed, so this would be -1, -2, -3, -4. And the -1 that I did before, the -2 I did before, was already the correct answer. Because this is -1 and this is -2, and we span the carrots. Now try setting grid column start to a negative value. So let's think first. If we want this to start here, we're not reversing it. We're not spanning it to a negative or to a previous place. If I wanted to start here, I would either go grid column start 1, 2, 3, 4. I could go 4 if I count from the left, or I could go -1, -2, -3, probably, right? Grid column start -3, and that's it, and all the weeds are gonna die now. Instead of defining a grid item based on the start and end positions of the grid lines, you can define it based on your desired column width. Okay. Using the span keyword. Keep in mind that span only works with positive values. So instead of saying you start here and you start at this column number and you end at this column number, if we have one set already, grid column start 2, so 1, 2. We can say I want you to span 2 grid. I don't care about the number that it is, but however many there are, I want you to take up 2 of them. Grid column end. We still use grid column end. We don't use a grid span or something. We tell it, I want you to end here, and I want you to span, let's do 4. So now it spans to 1, 2, 3, 4 other columns. We want to span 2. So this, I assume, means span to this 1 number, 2 numbers from here. Try using grid column end with the span keyword again to water your carrots. Okay, so we have grid column start set to 1, grid column end, span, and we want it to span, I assume it's 1 by default. We want to span 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but I bet that any value greater than 5 would work. 5 works, does 50 work? 50 works also. 4 wouldn't work, because that's not enough, but 5 or greater gets us the result that we want. I have to be careful so I don't roll over my dog's tail. He's sleeping right next to me. You can also use the span keyword with grid column start to set your items with relative to the end position. What was that sentence? You can also use the span keyword with grid column start. Okay, so we could span it, we could tell it you start here and span this many, or we could go the other way and say you end here and I want you to span this many to the start. Grid column start. And it is set to 6 here, which is interesting. I thought it ended here, but we actually count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Setting something to 6 here is legal. And how many of them do we want it to span from the end here? We want it to span to the start. 1, 2, 3 columns. Not 3L, 3 columns. Neato. Neato. We have water here. We want it to be there. Typing both grid column start and grid column end every time can get tiring. Yeah. Fortunately, grid columns is a shorthand property that can accept both values at once, separated by a slash. So instead of typing grid column start and grid column end, we can go grid columns. And the first value is the start. So if I tell it to start at 2, column singular. Okay, grid column, not grid columns. I can use that and I can give it a start value. 2, 3, we want to start at 4. And we want it to end at 6. Or any value greater than 6. Try using grid column to water these carrots. The span keyword also works with the shorthand property, so give it a try. So we can again use grid column. And the first one was the start value, so 2. And we could now say end at 5. Or we could say I want you to span, however many, 1, 2, 3 of them. Right, 2 wouldn't be enough. 4 would be too many. I want you to span 1, 2, 3 to 3 of those vertical lines. One of the things that sets CSS grids apart from Flexbox is that you can easily position items in 2 dimensions. Exactly. So Flexbox is 1-dimensional. We can either say go along this row or this column. We can't say go both ways. And with grid row start, we can move things down now. The garden itself is exactly the same setup. There wasn't anything different set on this container. It's still display grid, still has this many columns and rows. we can go grid row start, and we would do the same way as we do with the columns. This is line 1, 2, 3. We want to move you to 3. Next, please. Now give the shorthand property grid row a try. Here they're not taking it step by step, but they're throwing us at grid row immediately. First one is the grid row start value. I want it to start at 1, 2, 3 again. And now we could either, so we could slash and give it the end, or we could say I want you to again span 3 of them. Nice. Now with this previous one, it might be interesting to know that we can, of course, also we can span them across multiple columns and rows at the same time, but they have to be rectangles. We can't make an L shape, we can't make a Tetris piece shape, well apart from the bar and the square. But if we can make it, if we can span it evenly, like this shape would be possible, or that shape would be possible, or even this shape would be possible, but nothing that is not a rectangle. That I assume will be a lesson later. Use grid column and grid row at the same time to set position in both dimensions. We want this poison down here. So I'm going to go grid column, and I want you to start at the column. Now we have to think in axes again, at the column 2. And I want you to start at the grid row, and that'd be 4. No, that wouldn't be 4, that'd be 5. Because 1, 2, 3, 4. Nope, I want you to start at grid row 5. You can also use grid column and grid row together to span larger areas within the city. Give it a try. That's what I meant. We don't have to go across just a single axis. We can go grid column, start at 2, and we could go either way. We could say go to 6 now, or we could say span 4 of them, and grid row, we can tell it start at 1 and span 4 of them, no, 5 of them here, or we could go span all the way to 6. But span 5 reads better, to me at least, because it tells me there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I want you to cover all 5 of them. In typing out both grid column and if typing out both grid column and grid row is too much for you, yeah, that was a burden. There's yet another shorthand for that. Grid area accepts 4 values separated by slashes. Grid row start, row end, and column end. One example of this would be, let's do exactly what they do here, and then let's look at what it means. Grid area 1/1/3/6. So that it's not column, row. It is what row do you start at and what column do you start at. So we wanted to start at row 0, at row 1, but we want to start at column 2. And where do you end? We can tell to span again. First one is row, so I wanted to span 3 rows, and 6 we could actually keep. 6 was fine, and we could also do span 4. It does the same shorthand. Next, how about multiple items? You can overlap them without any trouble. Use grid area to define a second area that covers all of the unwatered carrots. So we can't use a single shape and turn it into this irregular shape here, but we can span multiple rectangles. It doesn't matter if they overlap for us now. So part of this water that we're gonna have cover this area will cover an already watered area, which is fine. I don't know if it's fine for carrots, but it's fine for this exercise. Water 1, is this one that we have here already in the vertical. Now for water 2, we want to go grid area. Grid area, and we wanted to, first one was row. We wanted to start at row 2. I want to start at column 1, 2, 3. Column 3, and we wanted to rows span 3 and columns also span 3 columns. That with a span I prefer over counting the columns, because I know I can look at it and I see there's 3 columns of carrots, so span 3. Here's 3 rows of carrots, so also span 3. The other way around, actually, first rows, then columns. If grid items aren't explicitly placed with grid area, grid column, grid row, etc., they are automatically placed according to their order in the source code. So we had that before, same as we did with Flexbox. Everything by default has an order of 0. By default, all grid items have an order of 0, but this can be set to any positive or negative value. So what we want to do here is we want to move the poison to the weeds over here. And these will be set, these other waters. Okay, this isn't multiple, this isn't 2 waters, this is 4 waters we have here. Because nothing is set to span anything. There is just water, poison, water, 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 covering the carrots. If we did order -1 or any negative value, -100 works just as well. It is moved before all the elements that have an order of 0, and because everything has an order of 0 by default, setting the order to a negative value will make it the first one. In the other direction, any value for order that is greater than 0 puts it at the back of the queue and puts the poison on the weeds. Now what do we have? We have water covering weeds, and we have poison covering carrots. That doesn't seem great. Okay, so these are in grid. I assume they wrap. So we have poison, water, poison, water, poison, water, poison, water, poison, water. Remix that. Now the water and poison are alternating, even though all of the weeds are at the start of your garden. Set the order of the poisons to remedy this. So as we had before, if the poison gets an order value that is less than 0 or less than the others, it would appear first. An order of -1 on this class, not an ID, of a class of poison, does that for us. It moves them out of the, it moves them out of the order, I guess, and puts them all first before all of the water appears. What's this? What is this? Is this a glitch, or is that intentional? Up to this point, you've had your garden set up as a grid with 5 columns, each 20% of the full width, and 5 rows, each 20% of the full height. So the grid was evenly separated into fifths, with each column and each row taking up 20% of the available space. This was done with the rules grid template, columns 20%, 20%, 20%. So we divided that with just saying if you have a row, I'm going to tell you have a template for rows where rows evenly take up 20%. But you can set the grid up however you like. It doesn't have to be even. We can say this one is 20%, this one's 20%. Then we have a column that's 10%, another column that's 10%, or we can even say 50%. So however we split up the 100% that are available to us, we can. Or we can, okay, it would be easier to say there's 2 columns here, I guess, because we can't change because we can't change anything else. I wonder why it's this wide then if we don't have anything set. Because we can't set anything on the water, we can't make the water span a number of columns here. We can only tell the container you are now 2 columns only. So grid template columns, 50%, 50%. And see how they changed all the grid lines. So before this was all, and I don't know what, we're probably overriding something that's set and not visible to us. If we just said 50%, there would be no second column. We say 50%, 50%. Then we have two columns. The rows are still, we still have 5 rows because we haven't touched that. But for columns, we only have 2 now. And they both share exactly the same space. If we did 40 on one, we did 40 on one and 60 on the other, we would move where that split is here. Or we could go 20 and 80. Completely up to us. Here we want to go 50%, and let's see if we could even go 50%, 10%, 20%, 10%, 5%, 5%. So that would be completely possible. You can say one column takes up 50% of the width. Then we have one that takes up, I forgot what it was, another column that takes up 10, 20, 10, 5, 5%. We could even go pixels in the middle here. And then I think the last one we could set to auto. The last one will take up all the remaining space. It solves the task, and we're just going to click next because it did what they wanted us to. Whatever happened on the right was just an exercise. What else? Specifying a bunch of columns with identical widths can get tedious. Yeah, very. Luckily, there's a repeat function to help with that. So here, what they're telling us is we could go 20%, 20%, 20%, 20%, 20%. Or we could say, you know, repeat 20% 5 times. And we'd write it exactly like that. Repeat, well, not exactly like that. We'd say repeat 5 times 20% to give us a total of 100%. And they're not changing the template rows, but we can change the template columns. Grid template columns. Repeat, and if we did 5, 20%, nothing would change. If we did 5, 10%, then we would say it's the same as writing 10%, 10%, 10%, 10%, 10%. We could also go 10 times 10%, and that would be the way that is split up. Using grid template columns with the repeat function, create 8 columns each with 12.5% width. So they want us to have 8 repetitions of 12, and we have a gap here, 12.5, because 8 times 12.5, well, 12.5 times 2 is 25, and 4 times that is the same as 8 times 12.5, which is 100%. Math, 5th grade, right? 3rd grade. Grid template columns doesn't just accept values in percentages, but also length units like pixels and ems. You can even mix different units together. That's naughty. So let's do grid template columns, and we can do the same with rows, of course. We can split that up however we like. Now we want, interesting, we want water. Then we want to have poison and more water. So let's do 100 px. Gives us, because we only set a single template column here, gives us just one column, but we want more columns. The next column we want to have as a 3m wide. That covers exactly the weeds here. And then we want 40%. Does that add up to exactly 100%? No, it doesn't. Because a percentage plus so relative value plus absolute values will not lead to exactly 100% unless the container is a very particular, very specific width. We could say go 50%, and that we see it covers more than the carrots. But to fill all this remaining space, we'd have to go like 60, 70, 80 would be too much. So 72, 73. That isn't enough, and 74 would be too much. So it's 73 point. So as I mean, it's impossible to hit that exactly. We could go auto. Auto would be whatever space is remaining, but it also is fine to not fill the container, to not fill the garden. So what if there's this empty space of dirt left over here? As long as the exercise is happy, we can keep it at that. We do not have to get to an even 100%, neither in the columns nor in the rows. Grid also introduces a new unit, a fractional FR. So we have px for pixels, em for ems, rem for root ems, we have vw for viewport width, vh for viewport height. We have fr that we can only use inside of grid. We can't use a margin of 12 fr because fr is a fraction of the grid that we are in. Or the fraction of the space that's available to the grid, I think is the right way of saying that. Each FR unit allocates one share of the available space. We have it. For example, if two elements are set to 1 FR and 3 FR respectively, the space is divided into 4 equal shares. So we have a pie. We have a big cake. And we want to divide it into fractions. If we say you get 1 fraction and you get 3 fractions, well, how many fractions is that? That's 4 fractions total. So all of the cake that is available, we first see how many fractions do we want. We cut it into 4 in the total number of fractions, 4 fractions in this example. And then we know how much each fraction is. If we did that with different values, like if we wanted to divide the cake into 1 and 7 pieces, well, we'd cut it into 8 pieces first, and then we know now that we've divided it evenly and equally, we can take out one of the fractions. First element occupies 1/4, and the second, okay, that's basically what I was saying. Here, weeds make up the left 1/6 of your first row, and carrots the remaining 5/6. Create 2 columns with these using FR units. Grid template columns. So we have 6 spaces total. I want the first one to have one of these 6 units, and 5 for the other. This just doesn't happen today. We have 2 columns now. We can also have gone 1 FR, 1 FR, 1 FR, 1 FR, 1 FR, 1 FR. This would still give us 6 units, but now we have individual columns here, whereas we really want one that's yay wide and one that's yay wide. So split it into 1 FR and 5 FR. There we go, we had that earlier. What's this? Okay, so here, I think I know what I want us to do. When columns are set with pixels, percentages, or ems, any other column set with FR will divvy. Okay, I didn't know that. Will divvy up the space that's left over. So an FR unit is not a portion of the total grid width, but a total of the width that is available or that is remaining. Here the carrots form a 50 pixel column on the left and the weeds a 50 pixel column on the right. So if we did this, if we did grid template columns 50 px and 50px. We would have 2 columns. Why is the poison over here? So the width of these is correct, but we need this to move over there. So we need to have a 3rd column that fits all the empty space here. And I guess we could do auto, right? No, if we do auto, that doesn't work at all. But if we say 1fr, then the poison's gone. To make 3 more columns that take up the remaining space. So these ones are 50 pixels, these ones are 50 pixels. And using fr, make 3 more columns. Now 1fr and 3fr doesn't make a difference, because this is the only fractional column in here. If I give it 2 of however much space I have left, or 1, it's the same column. It's not sharing that with anything else. But I can do 1fr, 1fr, 1fr. Now the wheat is covered. It doesn't matter exactly how these are split in the middle here. We just need to have 3 columns. So the poison shows up here. I could also have said you take up 2 and you take up 7. It doesn't change anything about the ones that are set in pixels, but it changes how these are divided in here. It's just that we needed to have 2 columns, 3 columns, otherwise the poison would not show up. But the split is completely irrelevant. Could also have made one of them a pixel value, just as fine. We just need to have a third column here. That's a full field. Now there is a 75 pixel column of weeds on the left side of your garden. 3/5 of the remaining space is growing carrots, while 2/5 has been overrun with weeds. Use grid template columns with a combination of px and fr units to make the necessary columns. Grid template columns. So what was it? The first one was 75 px. So we have the poison covering the weeds here. Then we have something that takes up 3 fractions. Right now there's only a single column and it takes 3 of the remaining space, doesn't share that with anything, so it gets all of the space. And there we go. So we have this column set, this left column set in pixels. That one is statically always 75 pixels wide, and the remaining space, so all of this, is divided into 2 columns, because we have 2 things in our grid template columns here. One that takes up 3 of this space, so this much. Nope, did not need to take that screenshot. And one that takes up 2 of the remaining space, which is this much. 3 here, 2 here. We don't need to tell it that it is 3/5 or 2/5. It does that math for us automatically because it sees a 3, sees a 2, it adds them. 3 plus 2 is 5, so this must be 3 out of 5 total. Grid template rows works much the same as grid template columns. So as we had similarly in Flexbox, if it works with grid template columns, it works with grid template rows. Use that to water all but the top 50 pixels. So we have one column that's 50 pixels and one. Oh, wait, no. Note that the water is set to fill only your 5th row. So if I did 50px 1fr, I would have 2 rows. I would have one empty row, and I would have one big row with all the carrots in it, Where's the water? The water doesn't appear in the second column. The water appears in the fifth. Second row appears in the fifth row. So we need to give it more empty rows. So can I go 0, 0, 0, 0? Okay. A row does not need to have a height. A row can be set to a height of nothing. It's just important that we have 1 column, 2 columns, 3 columns, 4 columns, and then in the 5th column the water appears. Grid template is a shorthand property that combines... Okay, this will be a lot of slashes again. Grid template is a shorthand property that combines grid template rows and grid template columns. For example, so it goes row first and then column. Same as with the other shorthand that we had earlier. For example, grid template 50% 50% slash 200 pixels will create a grid with 2 rows, 1 row, another row, that are 50% each, and 1 column that is 200 pixels wide. Try using grid template to water an area that includes the top 60% and left 200 pixels of your garden. So rows come first. So 60%, and let's do 40% for the rows. So the first one, the rows will be split into 60% and 40%, just 2 rows. I could add more, I don't need more. And I want you to also do the left 200 pixels. And then just, we could leave it at that, or to fill it up, I could say you take up the remaining space by being 1 FR unit, 1 fraction unit. Your garden is looking great, thank you. Here you've left a 50 pixel path at the bottom of your garden and filled the rest with carrots. Unfortunately, the left 20% of your carrots have been overrun with weeds. Use CSS grid one last time to treat your garden, and then it'll be time to say goodbye. Grid template. We have rows first, and we have 50 pixels left at the bottom. It's fine to go 1 FR first and then go 50 pixels. It doesn't have to be that fractions come last. The browser can work out the dimensions here for us. And the left 20% are poison, and the remaining 80% are carrots. And there we have it. We could have split this into 20. Could we? I don't think we could have. Yeah, we could have. We could divide this down here into more rows as well now, but since we're not using them for anything, let's stick to the 50 pixels and be done with that. Next, and that seems to be the grid garden. And look at that, the frog's back. The Flexbox Froggy frog is back. And that was it. That was pretty much what I was aiming for today. I want to see what these exercises are about. I can now definitely, I can recommend them if you want to try some Flexbox and some CSS Grid. They are a good introduction. They are not the closest possible thing to how we'd use them in real projects, but it makes you familiar enough with the properties, with the Flexbox align items, align content, align self, and with grid, just to know how settings can be passed in here. That I think is, and it took like half an hour to 45 minutes with explanation to do the exercises here. So absolutely doable, and a nice explanation. I like this interface. I will put the links, so these are both on CodePip. You can create a free account to get access to them. They have more exercises. Let's look at some other games. They have more exercises on their pro plans. that I have not checked out. So they have ones on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. The free ones are the ones that we did today. If you want to do games that teach you JavaScript, math, array methods, and scope, they have that available as well. I haven't even checked the pricing. You can also go to flexboxfroggy.com, which is exactly the same, but not hosted on the CodePip. I'll put the... Will I put... So on Twitch, I'm not sure if I will, if I can. I'll see how I can do that. If you're watching this on YouTube, you will find the links to these games in the description, and you can repeat them. The exercises will be the same, so you can follow along if you like. They are a good fun. I mean, that was 1.5 hours now almost of us learning some Flexbox, and I'd be, if I didn't already know Flexbox, be willing enough and I think equipped enough to try using it in a project. This will probably, I mean, I learn better in doing real things. So if I want to apply this knowledge now, I'm rarely putting frogs on lily pads. I'm rather putting information on screens, on interfaces, but remembering, oh yeah, that if we treat this one as the lily pad now, and the title and the timestamp, those are frogs. I need to move them around, you know, flex, row, reverse, and all that. That would be transferable enough, I'd say. And with that, I am going to call it a day on the stream. This wasn't meant to be very productive today. I wanted to have mixed this up a little again, because I didn't prepare anything, and I don't know, the last few days I felt a bit unexpectedly tired, to be honest. And next time I want to try to build in public again. I have a few things, and that's my issue, that I don't know which one to focus on. I have one where I want to create a new data source and add a resume to a Next.js application. I have one where I want to do some SEO again. I want to explore a few APIs. So I don't know what I'm gonna do on Thursday. Next stream will be on Thursday, 10 p.m. Central European time, and I'm not sure if anyone else has switched clocks recently. I might have to update my my posts. Otherwise, thank you for following along. You'll find the links to this in some descriptions. If not, go to codepip.com and play the games. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll talk to you again on Thursday. See you soon.